He didn't fight for her. He didn't speak for her. He didn't flinch when they put handcuffs on his wife. 3 years later, she stepped out of prison quietly. No wedding ring, no tears, no apology waiting. And by then, the woman he chose over her had taken everything. Except her silence, except his guilt. The morning she was arrested, Serena Vell made tea like it was any other Tuesday. Her silk scarf draped gently over the collar of her white blouse. Hair pinned up, light makeup, no heels. She preferred quiet souls over loud entrances. She folded the dish towel, turned off the kettle, and placed a mug beside Kellen's untouched breakfast. The eggs had gone cold. The toast never left the plate. Kellen hadn't come down. Again, she glanced at the clock. 8:12 a.m. Exactly 1 year ago that morning, they'd signed the Roke Systems Series C agreement together. Back then, he held her hand after the meeting. Now he barely looked at her. The knock came heavy and sharp, like it belonged to someone who already knew the ending. When she opened the door, the federal agents didn't say her name. They read it, loudly, formally, like a charge sheet. Full name. All 3 counts. All eyes on her. Behind them, neighbors peered from driveways. Phones were raised. Cameras clicked. Someone across the street whispered, "Is that her?" They didn't let her change. They let her grab her purse, nothing more. The mug on the counter still steamed. The man upstairs still said nothing. They didn't handcuff her until she stepped onto the front porch. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She only turned her head back toward the house and waited. Kellen appeared at the top of the stairs, shirt half-buttoned, jaw clenched, eyes unreadable. He didn't run down. He didn't ask what they were doing. He didn't even say her name. She blinked once, then twice, and that was it. They closed the door on her before he could even blink back. The courthouse smelled like old paper and plastic seating. Serena's lawyer, grey-bearded and overbooked, kept whispering that things didn't add up. "There's no paper trail leading back to your desk," he muttered. "But the digital signatures..." She cut in quietly. "I haven't touched a company file in 8 months." He looked at her, troubled. "Then how did your credentials approve the fund transfers?" She exhaled. "I was locked out. Around the same time Kaylin was hired." His pen paused mid-scratch. "You think she framed you?" Serena didn't answer. She didn't need to. Kaylin Dawn, public relations, gold mine. Internally, a calculated storm wrapped in charm. She had the power to shift investor calls, fire consultants, and cut checks with soft smiles. She'd once kissed a potential funder on the cheek mid-meeting and laughed off his inappropriate remark, then turned the moment into a closing deal. Everyone thought Kaylin was bold. Serena saw she was reckless, but reckless in the right dress could pass for genius in Silicon Valley. Kellen arrived 20 minutes into the hearing, pressed navy suit, polished shoes, no tie, no emotion. He sat behind the prosecution, not beside her, not behind her, not near her. Her hands didn't shake, but her lawyer noticed and placed a gentle palm over hers. The prosecution painted a story, 3 embezzlement patterns, tax misfiling traced to outdated routing numbers, internal misappropriation from non-existent vendors, all sourced from her credentials. No mention of Kaylin, no reference to the abrupt password change 8 months ago, no subpoena of internal logs or board meeting transcripts. And Kellen never spoke. Not when the judge asked if anyone from Roke Systems wanted to testify on the company's founding structure. Not when the defense pointed out her documented removal from financial approvals months before the fraud began. He stayed silent, like a CEO managing a scandal, not a husband witnessing betrayal. Her parents weren't in court. She'd asked them not to come. But her younger sister watched from the second row, jaw clenched tight, eyes locked on Kellen. When the verdict came, Serena closed her eyes. 3 years. Federal low-security facility, no parole. When she stood, cuffs returned to her wrists. She faced Kellen. Only him. The courtroom quieted. No shouting, no breakdown. Just her voice. Low, controlled. This company was my life too. Now it's your prison." He didn't flinch. The transport van smelled like bleach and recycled fear. Her seatbelt clicked into place with a heavy snap. The woman beside her sobbed softly into her sleeve. Serena sat still. Not numb, not angry, just still. By the time she was processed at the facility, the news had spread everywhere. Tech billionaire's wife arrested for multi-million-dollar fraud, power couple no more. Serena Roque indicted Roque Systems' internal scandal. Is the vision crumbling? The media ate up the story, and, when she didn't deny it, they labeled her guilty without hesitation. She received 2 letters from her family in the first month. One from her old college roommate, none from Kellen, not even to ask if she was okay, not even to ask why she hadn't fought back harder, not even to say goodbye. The silence was his loudest choice. In her 3rd week, a woman named Fallon offered her a seat in the library. "You were on the news," Fallon said bluntly. Serena looked up. "Was I smiling?" Fallon smirked. "Nah. You looked calm. Too calm." Serena nodded once. "I already knew how it would end." At night, she journaled. Not for revenge, not for proof, but to remember who she was before the world decided she was a thief. She wrote about the first time she met Kellen, sitting outside a dingy cafe with a laptop and 2 broken dreams between them. She wrote about how she believed in vision, how she stayed up debugging code with him even when her own work waited, how she negotiated their first deal with her voice shaking but her spine firm. And she wrote about the silence, not the silence between verdict and cuffs, but the one between a wife's question and a husband's lie. One night, her roommate Fallon asked, "You gonna take him back if he apologizes?" Serena didn't hesitate. "I'll thank him." Fallon blinked. "For what?" Serena folded the corner of her page. "For showing me who I never want to be." 3 months into her sentence, Serena memorized the library's floor layout. The law books were tucked in the back, behind old GED prep guides and a rack of wrinkled romance paperbacks. The prison didn't restrict her reading. No one expected her to do anything with it. They all assumed she'd just be quiet, polished, disciplined. The polite woman who fell from grace. But she wasn't fallen. She was sharpening. She read during every free period: tax law, contract structure, internal fraud cases, boardroom ethics. She highlighted rules no one had quoted during her trial. She flagged clauses she recognized from her time at Roque Systems. Clauses Kaylin Dawn would have needed to exploit to get her locked up. She started helping other inmates file motions and appeals. Women with no lawyers. Women who had been chewed up by systems worse than hers. Women who came to her because she didn't treat them like inmates. She treated them like women who got left behind. Fallon joked one day, "You're the CEO of the prison library now." Serena smiled, closing her book. "Only if you're my COO." They laughed. A real laugh. It echoed in the quietest place on earth. In her 4th month, a counselor pulled her aside after workshop duty. "There's a letter for you." Serena froze. "From where?" The woman tapped the envelope. Roque Systems. It was thin. No return address. No handwritten note inside. Just a printed release form terminating her remaining stock options as part of executive misconduct. She read it once, then again, then folded it slowly and placed it inside a law textbook. Fallon asked later, "You okay?" Serena replied, "I am now." By year 1, the world had moved on. Kellen Roque's face was still in magazines. Kaylin Dawn was still hailed as the sharp woman who cleaned house at Roque Systems. Serena's name was a forgotten byline. No one chased the truth anymore. But the inmates in that prison knew. They asked about contracts, fund tracing, false accusations, and legal grey zones. Serena taught them, quietly, and with each woman she helped, a piece of her own power returned. She became more than the ex-billionaire's wife. She became the woman no system could unmake. On her 900th day inside, she received a visit request from her sister. The guard at check-in raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to see this one?" Serena nodded. When she stepped into the room, her sister looked nervous, but determined. She sat, then slid a magazine across the table. Forbes. Front page, Kellen Roke. The headline, Kaylin Dawn disappears. Roke Systems under ethics probe. Serena didn't touch it. Her sister watched her carefully. The board's doing a full audit. Investors are bailing. She took millions. Serena gave a slow, single nod. Of course she did. Her sister leaned in. They think it started a year after you left, but I know better. Serena finally looked up. It started the day he let her in. There was no pride in her voice, no vindication, just certainty. Her release date arrived with no fanfare. Grey slacks, clean white blouse, hair tucked neatly under a scarf. She didn't ask for anyone to come. Her sister came anyway. In the passenger seat sat the same Forbes issue, still creased, still untouched. You want to read it now? Her sister asked, pulling into traffic. Serena looked out the window. I already lived it. That night, back in her sister's guest room, Serena unpacked 3 things. 1. A leather bag filled with letters she never sent. 2. A folded copy of her termination letter. 3. A single silver pen that had somehow stayed in her prison locker. She placed them on the dresser, side by side. Not trophies, not wounds, just truth. She didn't tell anyone what her next step would be. She wasn't chasing revenge. She wasn't chasing him. She was building something with a different kind of silence, this one made of choice. She opened a new bank account, applied for a small consultancy license, and called Fallon. You once said I was CEO of the prison library, she said on the phone. Fallon laughed. You trying to promote me again? I'm trying to start something real, for women who got buried and want to come back standing. Fallon paused, then said the only word that mattered. I'm in. 3 weeks later, Serena got an invitation in the mail. It wasn't from Roke Systems. It wasn't from anyone who knew her before the scandal. It was from a non-profit startup accelerator in LA, one specifically, supporting women with criminal records who wanted to enter tech. A formerly incarcerated woman she'd once helped with an appeal had submitted her name as a potential mentor. No press, no publicity, no strings, just, we'd be honored if you joined us. Serena stared at the envelope for a long time, then packed a bag. The night of the gala, she walked in alone. Hair swept back, no jewelry, a clean navy dress. She shook hands, gave soft smiles, spoke when asked, not for attention. Halfway through, she felt the air shift. People turned, cameras flashed, a buzz ran through the room. He had arrived, Kellen Roke, still tall, still polished, still walking like the world owed him a greeting. But this time, no one rushed to his side. He stood under a spotlight, alone, and then he saw her. The look on his face wasn't pain, it was recognition of everything he'd thrown away. He moved toward her. Slowly, she didn't step back, she didn't step forward. When he reached her, he didn't speak at first. Just stood, searching for words. She sipped her drink. You always liked rooms full of power, she said flatly. He swallowed. You look whole. She gave a short, almost amused laugh. Turns out betrayal's a great detox. His eyes fell. She raised one hand. Don't. I need you to know. You need to forgive yourself, she cut in. But don't ask me to help. He looked at her like he didn't recognize this version. Because he didn't. This wasn't his wife. This was a woman who had risen, alone. He finally asked, Do you ever think about us? She looked him in the eye. You don't miss us. You miss who I was. And I'm not her anymore. Outside, the city lights shimmered across black glass buildings. She didn't linger. As she stepped into the car waiting for her, she finally allowed herself a breath. Not a sigh, not a cry, just breath. Clean, steady, hers. The first time Kellen Roke saw Serena, she was elbow-deep in a printer jam at the community co-working space downtown. It was a late Tuesday night, the kind where startup founders ran on caffeine and false optimism. She wasn't there pitching, coding, or planning a launch. She was printing a grant proposal for a non-profit mentorship group she'd built in college. She had a deadline, a busted machine, and zero patience for flimsy toner cartridges. "Need help?" Kellen asked from the snack bar, holding a half-eaten protein bar and wearing a hoodie with frayed drawstrings. "Do you own a paperclip and a degree in mechanical engineering?" She shot back without looking up. He walked over anyway. 2 minutes later, the paper fed smoothly. "You're not bad with your hands," she said dryly. "And you're not bad with sarcasm," he replied. She smirked. "It's cheaper than therapy." That was it. No sparks, no slow-motion glance. Just mutual irritation and accidental efficiency. And that's how it began. At the time, Kellen was working out of a corner booth on a half-built app meant to automate freelance workflows. Serena was balancing 2 jobs, an administrative assistant by day, volunteer mentor by evening. They weren't in the same lane, but they were running toward something that felt similar. Ambition, ownership, freedom. Their first real conversation happened at the corner table 2 days later. She'd brought him coffee, not out of flirtation, but because she'd overheard him say his account was negative and caffeine mattered more than pride. "You look like the type who survives on cold brew and broken dreams," she said, dropping the cup. He looked up, startled, then laughed. "Add student debt, and you've got my memoir title." They started trading ideas. He explained his automation theory. She poked holes in his UI flow. He rolled his eyes. She fixed his pitch deck. They didn't fall in love like fireworks. They built it like a habit. 6 months later, they moved into a 1-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The place smelled like burnt cinnamon by noon every day. The walls were thin, the heater groaned, and the shower pressure required spiritual patience. They loved it. Serena typed client proposals on the floor, legs crossed, back hunched. Kellen scribbled app architecture on post-its stuck to the fridge. Dinner was cheap noodles, and their idea of splurging was buying 2 sauces instead of 1. But it was theirs. They weren't glamorous. They were gritty. She helped him register the LLC. He promised that if they ever made it, she'd never have to lift another printer tray again. She laughed. "Don't threaten me with luxury." Rogue Systems was born the day their rent check bounced and they pitched to a local investor using a borrowed projector and 4 cold coffees. Serena ran the numbers. Kellen made the jokes. They walked out with $30,000 in seed money and a 3-month commitment to build something real. He was the visionary. She was the builder. When they disagreed, they argued hard. Door slamming, ego bruising, cold shoulder arguments. But they always returned to the same question: what are we doing this for? And the answer was always the same: to build something we don't have to apologize for. The company grew, from their apartment to a tiny office with flickering lights and a single functioning AC unit. From 1 client to 5, from 5 to 50. And through it all, Serena stayed off camera. She didn't care about TED Talks, panels, or startup interviews. She preferred contracts, legal flowcharts, operational frameworks. The people inside the company knew Serena Vell was the steady hand, the shield. The reason vendors got paid on time, interns were retained, and investors didn't sue them after 3 pivots. Kellen called her the compass. Without her, he once joked in a meeting, "I'd be building code in a parking lot." They married quietly. No press release, no Instagram posts. Just a courthouse, a silver band, and 2 signatures that meant something deeper than equity. They skipped a honeymoon. She said, "Let's wait until we've earned rest." He promised, "One day, I'll take you somewhere without Wi-Fi." She smiled. That's either paradise or punishment. The first shift was so subtle it could have been ignored. A cancelled lunch, a forgotten billing report, a board meeting where Kellen showed up late, distracted, wearing a tie he never used to wear. Serena brushed it off. Startups got messy. Stress leaked into daily life. They were overdue for a vacation and hadn't slept more than 6 hours in a week. But then the passwords changed. Kellen started working later. Meetings ran long. New hires started popping up in departments Serena no longer managed. And then came Kaylin Dawn. She met Kaylin at a company retreat in Big Bear. The PR strategist arrived in a designer jacket, flawless makeup, and with a laugh that felt calculated, not joyous. Serena didn't dislike her at first. She just didn't trust the way Kaylin looked at rooms, like they owed her attention. The woman had ideas. Slick ideas. She could sell ice to Iceland and make the boardroom believe they invented it. But she overstepped fast, changed vendor agreements without review, held private briefings with investors, and, most notably, started calling Kellen after 11 p.m. Serena asked once, "You working late again?" Kellen rubbed his temples. "We're trying to land a high-profile feature. Kaylin's leading the push." She nodded, biting her tongue. But one night, while reviewing email headers for another department, she noticed something strange. Her account access had been downgraded to advisory. She wasn't even notified. When she confronted Kellen, he didn't deny it. "It's temporary," he said. "Just trying to consolidate management lines." She stared at him. "This company has my blood in the walls. You don't consolidate me." He said nothing. That was worse than yelling. She gave him one more chance. Their anniversary dinner. She reserved a small booth at the same cafe they'd shared coffee from that first week. He cancelled an hour before. Said Kaylin needed him to prep for a last-minute pitch. She didn't text back. She didn't go home angry. She went silent. That night, she packed away their early design sketches into a box. The one labeled "When It Was Just Us." She taped it shut. 3 weeks later, federal agents knocked on their door. Serena knew Kaylin Dawn wasn't dangerous because she was loud. She was dangerous because she was careful. She never made a move in plain view. She never asked questions she didn't already know the answers to. She praised people publicly, then stripped their authority privately. And she did it all with compliments that made even betrayal sound like growth. "You're so efficient. We figured we'd shift some of the smaller tasks off your plate. You've built such a strong foundation. Let's let the new hires carry the torch for now." But Serena had built the torch, and Kaylin was running with it, straight through the financials. It started with expense reports. Kaylin submitted high-dollar reimbursements under vague consulting labels, marketing dinners with no receipts, travel to conferences that never happened, vendor contracts signed under shell accounts. Serena flagged them in the system. Quietly, the system bounced her reports. She tried again, only to find her access disabled. Then came the whispers. "You're not involved with the financial reviews anymore. I thought you were still on the executive team. Is Kaylin CFO now, or?" The erosion was quiet, but steady. Kaylin had wrapped herself around the board like silk thread. Serena had no pull left. At home, Kellen became harder to read. He worked late, came home with his phone still glued to his ear, and forgot things he used to remember without effort. The date they closed their first deal. The name of her father's dog. What her voice sounded like when it cracked. Just a little, because she needed him to see her. Serena didn't cry. She observed. And in observing, she did what she always had. She prepared. She printed out the last few records she still had access to. Not copies, not originals, just fragments. Enough to form a timeline. Enough to prove she'd been sidelined. Enough to show Kaylin had her fingerprints all over sensitive accounts. She placed the files in a folder marked Review, left it on Kellen's desk. He never opened it. 2 nights later, she tried one last time. They sat in the kitchen, her with tea, him with his laptop. "I have to ask," she said, staring at the steam. Kellen didn't look up. "Is there something I should know?" she asked, voice calm. He finally met her gaze. Blinked. No. That was it. No follow-up. No explanation. No defense. Just a single syllable that felt like a steel door slamming shut. She didn't ask again, because a woman only asks once when she already knows the answer. The night before her arrest, Serena called her sister. They talked about mundane things, laundry, grocery lists, traffic. Then her sister said, "You sound tired." "I am," Serena replied. "But I think I'm about to sleep for a very long time." Her sister didn't understand what she meant. But Serena did. She felt the shift in the air, the way things grew too quiet before a collapse. The next morning, when the agents showed up, Kaylin wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. She had booked a press meeting in New York. The perfect alibi. The perfect distraction. Kaylin stood at the top of the stairs like a statue carved in cowardice. And Serena was taken, body intact, dignity bruised, soul still standing. From the moment the trial began, she knew it wasn't about guilt. It was about disposal. Rogue Systems didn't need her name in the credits anymore. They needed a fall, a headline, a fresh start. Kaylin made sure she got all three. The contracts Kaylin filed were backdated, with Serena's name stamped, via digital credentials that had never been updated after her removal. Expense records were tied to dormant accounts, ones Kaylin had revived without oversight. And every time Serena raised these points, the court asked one question: "But why didn't your husband speak up?" She didn't answer. She just looked toward him. And again, he looked away. Months later, inside prison, she'd reread the news headlines. She studied how Kaylin spun the narrative. Serena was brilliant but burned out. She stepped back from operations for personal reasons. She made decisions that, in hindsight, weren't aligned with the company's values. Kaylin made herself the savior, the one who rebuilt the ship after a woman's emotional collapse. And Kellen? He stayed silent, because in his world, silence looked like stability. But silence is only quiet until it echoes. And when it did, when Kaylin's lies started catching up to her, Serena was already free. Not by parole, but by clarity. By the time she stepped out of prison, she no longer feared headlines. She feared forgetting who she was before she tried so hard to save a man who didn't lift a finger when she drowned. During her first week out, she visited the city library. Not for books, for her name. She typed it into the search engine, waited. The first 3 results were articles about her trial. The next 5 were about Kaylin's disappearance. And the last one? A forum post. Former tech wife opens new consultancy for women with criminal records. No photo. No interview. Just a single line that made her exhale. She didn't vanish. She returned, smarter, slower, and done explaining herself. If you've ever had to rebuild after someone erased you, drop a comment. Share this story with someone who knows silence doesn't mean defeat. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful moments like this one. Kaylin Dawn didn't enter Rogue Systems with a resume. She entered with presence. The kind that made people adjust their posture. The kind that made seasoned executives listen twice to what she said, even if she said nothing new. She was charm in motion, and danger in perfume. Her official title was Public Relations Strategist. Unofficially, she positioned herself as the solution to every reputation concern the board whispered about but never addressed. Serena heard about her before she met her. Sharp, someone said. Charismatic, another added. Knows how to clean a brand without making it look dirty. But Serena didn't care about brand polish. She cared about product reliability, investor trust, and the employees, who hadn't slept through a full night since Series C funding dropped. She gave Kaylin one nod in their first meeting. Kaylin returned it with a grin and said, "You must be the woman who built the castle. I'm just here to redecorate the gates." Serena smiled back, but her silence said, "Try anything, and you'll find out who laid the bricks." At first, Kaylin made herself useful. She restructured media decks, doubled follow accounts across platforms, and secured 2 interview spots for Kellen in major tech podcasts. She made him sound like a visionary. She made Rogue Systems sound like the second coming of innovation. Serena noticed the shift in his demeanor. He started wearing tailored blazers again, started choosing Kaylin's phrases over his own, started looking at conference rooms like stages. One night, during a pitch prep meeting, Kaylin placed a folder on the table and said, "This language is too cautious. You've built something revolutionary. Let's speak like we mean it." Kellen beamed. Serena blinked slowly. "And if we overpromise?" Kaylin didn't miss a beat. "We'll adjust expectations after funding closes." That was the first red flag. But Kellen didn't see it. He saw energy, momentum, applause waiting in the wings. And Kaylin? She saw what most people missed, how easily Kellen needed to feel admired. Within 3 months, she was leading investor dinners. The invites stopped going to Serena. And when she asked about it, Kellen said, "It's PR, not your lane anymore." Serena looked at him, expression neutral. But something in her chest shifted. It wasn't jealousy. It was caution. Kaylin wasn't just winning the board. She was isolating the foundation, Serena. Kaylin had a way of making people underestimate her while giving her power. She laughed at the right jokes, played dumb when it suited her, but always walked out of meetings with exactly what she wanted. She flirted just enough, smiled just long enough, made everyone feel like they were in on the secret. Except there was no secret, only manipulation. Serena's access started thinning fast. One department's reports got rerouted to Kaylin. One executive whispered that financial forecasting had new filters. And then one day, her name was removed from an official statement without explanation. She asked Kellen. He barely looked up from his phone. "We're streamlining voice. Kaylin's running all public channels now." Serena didn't argue. She made a note and quietly printed the last 12 press memos Kaylin had approved. They were clean, but they weren't consistent. And inconsistencies, they were where truth leaked. The final straw came at the board summit. Serena had always opened those meetings, set tone, outlined the roadmap, grounded everyone in fiscal accountability. But this time, the agenda had her listed last. As executive oversight, notes, Kaylin opened instead. She stood at the head of the table, clicked through slides with a manicured finger, and said things like, "We're not just scaling, we're redefining our verticals. The public doesn't need to know how the engine works. They need to hear the roar." Serena folded her arms, watched, listened. Kellen watched too, but he didn't turn her way. And when the Q&A ended, Kaylin said, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and Serena will follow up with any legacy adjustments that need cleaning up." Legacy adjustments. Serena Vell, the woman who handled every investor transition, every legal agreement, every compliance restructure, now referred to as legacy. That night, Serena didn't go home. She drove to a quiet parking lot behind their old apartment, the one above the bakery. She stared at the fire escape they used to climb when the elevator broke. She thought about the time Kellen burned garlic and tried to lie about it, how he used to trace coding logic on her arm like it was a roadmap, how he once whispered, "No matter how big we get, I only trust you." That man was gone, replaced by someone who applauded a woman that polished lies into slogans. 2 weeks before her arrest, she noticed something unusual in the company's cloud access log. A payment authorization form had been approved by her ID, but the IP address wasn't hers. She flagged it, printed it, then dug deeper. Kaylin had been submitting consultant payments to a company named PR Vision LLC. The name wasn't flagged because it was legally registered, and PR Vision LLC's listed founder, a woman named Kay Dawn, spelled differently, but clear enough for anyone who wasn't pretending not to see. Serena compiled the documents, prepared a report. She planned to confront Kellen, but she never got the chance. The agents arrived 6 days later, and Kaylin, gone. Flight booked. Apartment, emptied. No forwarding address. Serena stood on her porch with cuffs around her wrists, while Kaylin disappeared with millions. And Kellen? He watched, didn't run, didn't call out, didn't say she didn't do it. Inside prison, Serena learned Kaylin's backstory the way most people learn about hurricanes. Too late. Kaylin had worked at 3 startups before Roke Systems. All 3 collapsed within a year of her departure. All 3 had internal financial confusion no one could trace. But Kaylin had never been charged. She always left before the wreckage could trace back to her. Roke Systems was just the next project. Only this time, she didn't just walk away with money. She left Kellen with nothing. and left Serena with a sentence she hadn't earned. The next chapter of Serena's story wouldn't be about Kaylin. But this was the part where the audience saw just how deep betrayal could go. Because Kaylin didn't just steal money, she stole silence. She made everyone believe Serena's quiet meant guilt. But Serena was never silent because she broke. She was silent because she was calculating the day the noise would come back to haunt them all. Kaylin Dawn understood one thing better than anyone in the room. Ambition is easier to control than guilt. She didn't need to outthink Serena. She just needed to outmaneuver Kellen. And all it took was a mirror. She reflected what he wanted to see. The image of the charismatic visionary he believed himself to be, but without the emotional weight Serena carried. Kaylin didn't question his ideas. She elevated them. She didn't challenge his authority. She flattered it. That was her edge. She didn't overpower. She displaced. The closer she got to Kellen, the more doors opened. First, it was after-hours meetings at the office. Then, dinners. Then weekend brainstorming retreats under the pretense of investor relations. It wasn't immediate. Kaylin wasn't sloppy. She layered her access. She started with financial review drafts, then board-facing narratives, then performance justifications to push Serena further out of relevance. She used phrases like, "She's overwhelmed," "She needs space," "She's done enough, let her rest." But she wasn't giving Serena rest. She was building a stage without her. Kellen didn't resist the shift. He welcomed it. Kaylin knew exactly how to fill silence with admiration. She once told him, "You're the rare kind of genius who forgets how intimidating he is." That line replayed in Kellen's head for weeks. Serena had loved him through failure. Kaylin praised him only when he soared. That's how betrayal always begins, when praise starts replacing partnership. Kaylin's biggest move came months before Serena's arrest. She convinced Kellen that Roke Systems needed urgency funding. A bridge round to accelerate marketing efforts ahead of a global rollout. She used high-pressure language. "If we don't move now, we'll lose the moment. We can clean the books after the campaign hits. You have a legacy to defend." Kellen signed off. Serena wasn't told. That round of funding, $4.2 million, was rerouted into 5 shell accounts tied to Kaylin's network. 2 were under aliases. 3 were funneled through a consultancy in Estonia. All paperwork bore Serena's approval signature, digitally, and she hadn't signed a thing. The internal audit that followed was Kaylin's final masterpiece. When anomalies surfaced, she spun it fast. "It's from a previous management era," she said to the board. "It reflects legacy workflows that weren't fully updated when I came in. We've cleaned it up already." But what she really meant was, "I framed someone else, and now I'm disappearing." Her exit was planned 2 weeks before Serena's arrest. She quietly sold her condo, withdrew assets into crypto, hired a private transport agency, not a rideshare or a cab, a silent vehicle service with 0 records past 90 days. Then she left a final email draft in the PR system for release after the board meeting. It read, "After an amazing run with Roke Systems, I've chosen to pursue new challenges. I'm incredibly proud of the team and trust they'll continue to innovate." Polished. Clean. No fingerprints. The day of Serena's arrest, Kaylin landed in Lisbon. She checked into a coastal hotel under a married alias, booked a spa appointment, and turned her phone off indefinitely. No alerts, no fallout, no shame. At Roke Systems, panic set in. Within a week, the board began receiving legal inquiries. Within a month, 2 major contracts dissolved. Within 6 weeks, a full ethics probe was triggered. Kellen tried to respond, tried to reassure, but by then, it was too late. The investors weren't angry about the fraud. They were angry they didn't see it coming. And the headlines. Roke Systems under federal investigation, disgraced founder's wife takes the fall. But was she the architect? Where is Kaylin Dawn? Kellen refused interviews. He issued statements. He hired crisis managers. He even considered stepping down. But the worst part, he still hadn't reached out to Serena. Not a letter. Not a call. Not a visit. Inside prison, Serena heard about Kaylin's vanishing act from a correctional officer. She ran? The officer asked, scrolling a tablet. Guess she was smart. Serena didn't respond, but later that night, she wrote Kaylin's name on a notepad, then drew a line through it. Not out of rage, out of clarity. Kaylin was never the real enemy. She was the shadow, the weapon. The enemy was the man who gave her the blade. By the time the truth surfaced, Serena's name was already buried under 3 years of dust, a quiet asterisk on a company bio, an archived scandal, an outdated headline. Kellen tried to shift the blame later. He told a colleague during a deposition, "I trusted the wrong people." But trust didn't sign those papers. Trust didn't change those passwords. Trust didn't sit in court and let a woman drown in silence. That was choice. His. In the end, Kaylin did what predators always do. She disappeared when there was nothing left to take. But what she left behind wasn't just chaos. It was a mirror. And Kellen Roke couldn't look into it anymore without seeing the woman who used to believe in him, standing alone, handcuffed, and still dignified. Serena didn't wait for justice. She became her own. And Kaylin? If she was still out there, Serena didn't care. Because Kaylin didn't win. She escaped. But Serena rebuilt. The agents arrived on a Thursday. It was early enough that the sun hadn't yet cleared the row of tall hedges outside the Roke estate. Early enough that the neighborhood was still quiet, except for the soft grind of tires against Serena's driveway. She was in the kitchen, slicing lemon for her tea. Kellen wasn't up yet. Or maybe he was. He just hadn't come downstairs. Serena heard the knock and didn't flinch. It was steady, measured, not urgent, not polite. The kind of knock you answer out of instinct and regret. She opened the door wearing slippers and a pale blue blouse. The lead agent held up a badge and said her name like it was evidence. Serena Noel Vell Roke. We have a warrant for your arrest under suspicion of financial fraud, tax evasion and corporate theft. No confusion, no explanation. Behind him, 2 agents moved in sync, one already at the steps, the other signaling to a vehicle around the corner. Serena blinked. Once, then again. "I'm sorry, what?" "We need you to come with us now." Kellen appeared at the top of the stairs, half-dressed, silent. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. No movement, no question. He didn't say, "What's going on?" He didn't say, "This is a mistake." He said nothing at all. They let her grab her purse. She took only what was necessary: ID, wallet, and the scarf she always wore when meetings mattered. She turned back once before they stepped outside. Kellen was still there, still silent. She wanted to believe he was in shock, wanted to believe this was out of his control. But deep down, she knew. His silence wasn't surprise. It was self-preservation. As they led her to the car, the porch lights from the neighbors' homes flickered on. One man across the street pointed. A woman whispered, "Is that?" Another raised a phone. She didn't rush. She didn't bow her head. She kept her shoulders square and her steps calm. At the station, everything was clinical. Prints, mugshot. Intake, questions. "Do you have any known allergies?" Yes. Public betrayal. They didn't laugh. She didn't care. By midday, the media had latched on. Her sister called but wasn't allowed through. The first article dropped by noon. CEO's wife arrested in Roke Systems fraud scandal, followed by power couple crumbles inside the charges against Serena Roke. Was she the mastermind all along? Every publication used the same mugshot: flat lighting, plain background, blank expression. They didn't use the photo of her speaking at a women's leadership summit, or the one of her shaking hands with the mayor after a tech grant approval, or the company party where she stood beside Kellen, visibly exhausted but smiling with pride. No, they used the one where her eyes looked tired and her blouse was wrinkled, because that's the one that told the story they wanted. Serena sat in a holding room for hours. A female officer offered her water. She asked if Kellen had called. The officer shook her head. When the lawyer arrived, he was already flipping through a thick stack of documents. Ms. Roque. Just Vel, she cut in. I'll drop the Roque part now. He paused. Fair enough. He laid out the evidence. It was too clean, too polished. Everything linked back to her digital credentials. All of it time-stamped. All of it untraceable to anyone else. Kaylin's name wasn't on a single form. But the dates matched her active window inside the company. Serena leaned back in her chair and whispered, "She was good." The lawyer raised a brow. "Sorry?" "She didn't frame me by mistake," Serena said. "She framed me by design." At the arraignment, Kellen sat behind the prosecution table. He didn't speak to her, didn't even glance her way. He showed up like a man required to be present, like a witness who knew proximity was part of the brand, but words would be too risky. Her eyes scanned the courtroom. No board members, no former colleagues, no investors. Only her sister, hands clenched, face red, rage visible. When the judge read the charges, Serena didn't blink. She was no longer surprised, just deeply, bitterly awake. Her lawyer leaned over. "They're offering a deal. Probation. 5 years supervised. Guilty plea?" she asked. "Yes." She shook her head. "No. Then they'll push for a custodial sentence. 3 years, minimum." Serena looked down at her palms. They were still steady. She wasn't. But steadiness was all she had left. "I'll take it." As they led her away, she turned toward Kellen for the last time. He stood. Still no words. And in that moment, she didn't see the man she married. She saw the man who chose not to protect her, the man who saw a flood coming and let her drown. She whispered only for him to hear, "This company was my life too. Now it's your prison." The courtroom hushed. But Kellen didn't chase after her, didn't follow, didn't flinch. Because cowards never need to run. They just stay still and let others burn. The van doors closed behind her with a dull thud. Serena sat in the back, hands cuffed, body still. The silence wasn't just external, it had moved inside her, settled behind her ribs, made its home somewhere just below the heart. The other women in the van didn't speak. Some had swollen eyes. Some stared blankly out the grated windows. Serena didn't cry. She didn't shake. She counted the turns instead. Left, right, stop, roll forward. When they passed the exit toward the Federal Women's Correctional Center, she finally exhaled. So this was real. At intake, a correctional officer asked her to remove all jewelry. She handed over her ring first. It caught on her knuckle for a split second, almost like it didn't want to let go. She slipped it off slowly, then dropped it in the tray. Her wedding band made a louder sound than she expected. The officer glanced at her. "You want to keep that in the box or send it out?" Serena stared at it for a moment, then looked away. "Send it out. I won't need it again." Her ID photo was taken under flickering fluorescent lights. It was sterile, like the world had been boiled down to numbers, forms, and a plastic-wrapped sandwich she didn't eat. Her room assignment was read off a clipboard. Low security. Bunk C-18. Block 3. Another officer muttered, "You don't belong here." Serena didn't respond. She knew what he meant. She looked like the headlines said she was. Educated, composed, soft-spoken. But systems didn't care about composure. Systems cared about signatures. And hers had been everywhere Kaylin needed it to be. Her cellmate, Fallon, looked up when the door opened. "Another one?" she said, flipping a page in her book. The guard nodded. "Be nice." Fallon smirked. "Aren't I always—" Serena stepped in, quiet, measured. She didn't sit immediately, didn't unpack. She just studied the room. 2 bunks, 1 shelf, peeling paint, a photo of a little girl taped to the wall. Fallon gestured to the bottom bunk. "That one's yours." Serena nodded once and sat. Neither spoke for a while. Then Fallon said, without looking up, "You don't look panicked. That means either you're guilty or you're used to being betrayed." Serena turned her head slowly. I'm not guilty. Fallon flipped another page. Then, welcome to the second group. The days moved differently inside. Time didn't pass. It stretched, then collapsed, then repeated itself. Serena found work in the library. It was dusty, understocked, but it was quiet, and silence had always been her ally. She shelved books, sorted returns, and when she wasn't working, she read. First fiction, then biographies, then law books. At night, Fallon asked questions about taxes, contracts, plea deals. Serena answered them all. Word got around fast. She used to run some billion-dollar thing. She knows how to read court documents. She's not like the others, but she's not judging you either. By month 3, Serena was reviewing letters for appeals. She didn't ask for payment. She asked for time. Time to sit with herself. Time to undo everything she believed about justice being obvious. Time to rebuild what Kellen never protected. She wrote in a notebook every night. Some entries were memories. Others were fragments. Most were warnings to her future self. Don't love someone who lets you explain yourself to handcuffs. Never trust ambition without boundaries. Protect your signature like it's your breath. Fallon became a strange kind of sister. Rough, funny, sharp as glass. She once asked, "What would you do if they gave you your old life back?" Serena smiled faintly. "I wouldn't take it." Fallon raised a brow. "Not even the money?" "I don't need money," Serena said. "I need peace." Fallon laughed. "Girl, that's richer than your ex." One day, a counselor entered the library during Serena's shift. "I have a letter for you," she said. Serena stood still. "From who?" The woman shrugged. "Roke Systems." She opened it in the staff closet. Alone. It was a formal notice. Termination of shares. Stripping of all remaining financial ties. No explanation, no apology. Just a clean cut. She folded the paper slowly, then placed it behind the library copy of The Art of War. Fallon found her later. "You good?" Serena replied, "I am now." Her body adjusted to the routine. Wake, work, read, walk, sleep. But her mind stayed moving, not toward revenge, not toward Kellen, but toward freedom, real freedom. The kind where she didn't owe anyone her silence or her explanation. In her 6th month, her sister visited. It was supervised, limited time, no hugs. Her sister sat across the plastic table, tears already welled. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Serena said, "Say something that's not about him." Her sister blinked, then nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I found a group. Women who lost things they can't talk about. They listen. I think you would have liked them." Serena swallowed back the lump in her throat. Not because of the group, but because someone was still saying you in the present tense. Her sister slid a folded magazine under the table. Forbes. Front cover. Kellen Roke. Headline. Kaylin Dawn disappears. Roke Systems under ethics probe. Serena looked at it. Didn't touch it. "You want to read it?" her sister asked. Serena shook her head. "I already lived it." Back in her cell that night, Fallon asked, "Would you take him back?" "If he begged." Serena answered without delay, "I'd thank him." Fallon blinked. "For what?" "For showing me who I never want to be." The next morning, Serena filed paperwork, not for early release, for business registration. It wouldn't go anywhere yet, but it was hers. A name, a structure, a plan. Fallon signed as witness. The librarian gave her an old clipboard, and Serena, still inmate 4772nd, filled out the form with a silver pen she'd been allowed to keep, because some things you hold on to, not for memory, but for future proof. Serena Vell didn't waste her time waiting. She used it. The day she stopped counting how many months she had left, everything shifted. She no longer measured time by days lost, only by lessons gained. While other inmates tried to outrun boredom, Serena hunted discipline. She built structure where the system tried to flatten her, Morning workouts, midday legal study, evening journaling, late-night quiet. She turned the noise of prison into routine, tight, private, deliberate. Because even if the world had branded her a criminal, she would not move through it like one. The library became her sanctuary. By her 10th month, she had read everything in the legal section, twice. She began writing her own guides. Simple, clear walkthroughs of motion filings, sentencing procedures, parole eligibility. Fallon called them law for the lost. One day, a woman named Ray from Block 2 came to her, holding a thick packet. They said, "You're the one to ask." Serena took the papers, flipped through the crumpled pages, and nodded. "I'll have notes for you tomorrow." The next week, she helped Ray submit a clean appeal. A month later, Ray's sentence was reduced by 6 months. Word spread. By year 2, Serena was no longer the CEO's wife. She was known as Miss Vell, the one who didn't talk unless it mattered, the one who stayed calm during inspections, the one who made sure your letter to the judge didn't sound desperate. It sounded intelligent. She kept her own copies of every motion she assisted with. Each one stamped, numbered, and stored in a binder she labeled proof of usefulness. Because in a world that tried to reduce her to a crime, she needed proof that she was more than surviving. She was building. Fallon once said, "You're doing the system's job better than the system." Serena replied, "That's because the system wasn't built to help us, just to keep us here." Fallon raised her coffee cup, "And you're quietly rewriting it." But not everything was noble. There were hard days, days when the walls pressed too tight, when the food tasted like punishment, when a guard said something just subtle enough to remind her who was in control. On those days, Serena didn't speak. She wrote letters to no one, to everyone. "Dear Kellen, you taught me what betrayal looks like in a suit. I'm not angry, I'm awake. Dear Kaylin, you didn't destroy me. You just forced me to start clean. That's not power, that's favor. Dear me, if no one ever apologizes, you're still allowed to move on. She never mailed them. She folded them into thin stacks and stored them behind the mirror in her bunk. Sometimes Fallon found her staring at them, still waiting on him to write back. Serena shook her head. "No, then why keep them? In case I ever forget how silence sounds when it wears a suit." A year and a half in, she got her first taste of real connection. The warden, a stiff man named Colborne, called her into his office. "Got a letter," he said. "Outside startup program wants to do a pilot, mentoring formerly incarcerated women. Someone submitted your name." Serena's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "No name listed. Just says, she helped me find my sentence, and now I want to help her finish hers." Colborne tapped his pen on the folder. "They want you to mentor. On paper, remote stuff." Serena sat still. "You'll allow it?" He shrugged. "You're not like the rest. You actually make this place easier to run." She began writing strategic proposals, business plans, operational outlines, all under a pseudonym. She didn't want her real name to be the headline. She wanted the work to stand alone. The startup was small but determined. They took her notes, revised their budget, secured a second investor. And then they sent her a single-page printout. "Thanks to your clarity, we closed our first round." It wasn't freedom, but it was movement. And after 18 months behind a fence, movement felt holy. Serena's body grew leaner, her walk more measured, her voice lower, but stronger. When younger inmates argued, they'd glance at her, not for approval, for grounding. She became a mirror no one wanted to disappoint. Fallon joked, "You're the correctional center's favorite ghostwriter." Serena smirked. "Then maybe I finally found peace in being invisible." On the 2nd anniversary of her arrest, she did something she hadn't done before. She drew a line. Literally. In her journal, she drew a line between 2 columns. Before and after. Under before, she wrote, "Wife builder, trusted, silenced." Under after, she wrote, "Mentor witness reclaimed enough." Then she closed the book. and for the first time in a long time, slept without dreams. But time didn't stop reminding her of what she'd lost. One afternoon, while helping a new inmate write to her children, Fallon muttered, "Your husband ever send anything?" Serena replied without emotion, "No." Fallon leaned in. "What if he shows up one day?" Serena's answer was immediate. "Then I'll thank him for teaching me how to finish alone." She kept her promise to herself. Every month, she submitted a new draft of her consulting firm framework. She called it Veil Systems, not after herself, after the version of her that refused to be erased. The mission was simple: equip women with conviction histories to re-enter corporate space with power, not pity. She built it from prison, and one day she would walk out with it already in her hands. The final year didn't feel like a countdown. It felt like a sharpening. Serena no longer measured time by weeks. She measured it by names. The names of women she'd helped write one-page resumes. The ones who left with motion grants approved. The ones who started calling themselves capable instead of lucky. She started a small workbook. It wasn't fancy. No cover, no publisher. Just handwritten modules with titles like Speaking in Boardrooms Without Apology Financial Documents. What? They don't teach you until it's too late. You are not the headline. Fallon helped edit it. Another woman, Nadine, illustrated diagrams. A third, Mako, typed copies into a borrowed system computer after work shifts. By the time winter returned, the workbook had become known around the facility as the Quiet Map, because that's how Serena moved. She didn't raise her voice. She raised others. Every woman who left with her help received a copy, wrapped in brown paper, signed in pen. They didn't hug her goodbye. Hugs weren't always allowed, but they nodded, deeply, like you do when someone hands you something you'll carry long after the moment ends. The day Fallon got her release date, she sat beside Serena on the library steps, legs stretched out, silence between them. "You gonna miss me?" Fallon asked. Serena didn't answer immediately. Then yes, but not the version of you that got stuck here. Fallon chuckled. "Damn, that sounds like a quote." "It is," Serena said softly. "From me." Tomorrow, Fallon left with 3 binders, 2 letters, and a post-it from Serena that said, "Don't chase proving you were innocent. Live like you were always worthy." The night before Serena's release, she burned the letters she'd never sent, each one folded, fed to a small metal dish she'd smuggled from the staff kitchen. One by one, to Kellen, she burned his first, because it was too heavy to carry, because it said too much he never earned the right to read. To Kaylin, she burned that one slow, because she knew Kaylin would never feel guilt, and she didn't want to be the only one holding it. To herself, she paused, then tossed it in last, because the woman who wrote that letter wasn't the one walking out. The morning arrived cold, not bitter, just quiet, like the world had finally run out of excuses. The guard at processing handed her a sealed bag. Inside, her ID, a bank card with the remaining $17.42 from commissary. The scarf she wore the day she was arrested, she ran her fingers across the silk. 3 years, 1 scarf, still hers. Outside, no press waited, no cameras, no family. Her sister had offered to pick her up. Serena declined. This moment was personal. She stepped through the gate with her chin high and her back straight, like she wasn't walking out of prison, but into the version of her life she'd finally chosen. Across the street, a black sedan waited. Not flashy, not tinted, just quiet. She opened the back door, slid in, and met the driver's eyes through the mirror. "You're Ms. Vell?" "I am." "No bags?" She held up the folder in her hands. "Everything important's in here." He nodded and pulled into traffic. She looked out the window as the city slowly opened again. Billboards, taxis, dogs on leashes, all moving like nothing had paused. But inside her, everything had changed. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't hopeful. She was clear. The sedan pulled up to a co-working space in Koreatown. Simple sign. brick walls. Inside, 4 desks, a whiteboard, and a small team of women typing away. One stood up when Serena entered. "You made it," the woman said. "Welcome home." Serena walked to the desk, placed her folder on the surface. Inside, the full Veil Systems Charter, the quiet map, workbook, a photo of every woman she helped behind bars. She turned to the small team. "I didn't build this company to erase the past," she said calmly. "I built it to use it." They listened, fully, not like investors, like believers. And finally, Serena sat down, at a desk with her name printed small on the glass divider. S. Veil founder, Veil Systems. Not Mrs., not former executive, not ex-wife. Just a name that no one could take from her again. The car ride home from the facility was quiet. No music, no small talk. Just the hum of tires and the occasional flick of a turn signal. Serena sat in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, eyes forward. Her sister, Mirelle, glanced over every few minutes like she wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. They hadn't seen each other in 6 months. The last visit had ended in a hug that lingered too long and words that didn't come out right. Now, there was no need for apology. They were past that. The road stretched toward the city, grey skies folding low like the weather had agreed not to be too dramatic today. "You want coffee?" Mirelle finally asked at a red light. Serena shook her head. "Not yet." "You hungry?" "I will be later." Silence again. Mirelle sighed. "Okay, I'll just keep driving until you speak." Serena smiled faintly. "That's fair." It wasn't until they were 10 minutes from home that Mirelle reached behind her seat and pulled out a folded magazine. Forbes, thick, glossy, and already creased at the spine, like it had been read more than once. She laid it on Serena's lap without a word. Serena didn't touch it right away. The cover stared up at her in bold gold font. Kaelin Dawn disappears. Roke Systems under ethics probe. And there he was, Kellen Roke, alone, staring somewhere between confident and exhausted. A sharp suit. But the eyes? Hollow. Serena flipped it open. Inside, 3 pages on Kaelin's disappearance. A timeline of shady contracts. Quotes from ex-board members hinting at deeper fraud. And not a single mention of her name in the body of the article. Her photo? Absent. Her story? Redacted by erasure. Mirelle kept her eyes on the road. "You want to read it?" Serena ran her fingers across the edge, then closed the magazine and set it on the dash. "I already lived it." They pulled into the driveway of Mirelle's townhouse. The garden was trimmed. The porch light was on. Everything soft and settled, the kind of stability Serena had forgotten people could live with. Inside, the air smelled like lemon wood polish and fresh fabric. Her room, already set up, was simple, white bedding, neatly stacked books, and a small desk by the window. Serena sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled. She wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't relieved. She was ready. Mirelle leaned in the doorway. "You still haven't asked me what happened to him." Serena looked up. "Because I don't care what happened to him." Mirelle raised a brow. Serena stood. "But I care what happens next." Later that night, she sat at the desk, opened her laptop, and logged into a fresh email account. She typed slowly, deliberately. Subject: consulting availability, former operations strategist body. "I am currently seeking strategic advisory. Work in operational restructuring for startups navigating founder exits, brand damage, or legal cleanup. No publicity, no headlines, just results." She attached her portfolio, scrubbed of emotion, filled with logic. No mention of Roke Systems, no mention of Kellen. Only her record of helping women behind bars rebuild companies from scratch. Then sat back in her chair, watching the inbox, not waiting. Opening. Serena didn't expect the inbox to light up overnight. She also didn't expect it to stay quiet for 4 days. The world hadn't been waiting for her, and that was fine. She wasn't trying to re-enter it with noise. She filled her mornings with routine, walks before 8, black tea at the same time every day, News headlines reviewed and deleted without reaction. In the afternoons, she built a pitch deck, a strategic framework, a mock team org chart for Veil Systems. No audience, just intention. On the 5th day, her first email came in. Subject: your name was passed to me. Body: I'm unsure if you're comfortable working in tech. Again, but we're a pre-seed org that had contact with Rogue Systems before things changed. We're not aligned with how they handled anything, but we remember how you showed up in those early calls. We're trying to survive this market. Would you consider a quiet conversation? It was signed by the CEO of a bootstrapped medical software company, one Serena remembered vaguely from her early Rogue Systems years. They had passed on Kaylin's PR packages, citing too much performance, not enough clarity. Serena had respected that. She replied the same evening. Yes, quietly, no cameras. Send a time. The call happened on a Sunday morning. No calendar invite, just a Zoom link and a 5-minute delay. When the woman appeared on screen, her hair was in a bun and her eyes were direct. You remember me? Serena nodded. You turned down a 3-tier deal Kaylin offered. Said it was more buzzword than product. She smiled. You remembered. I remember who listened. They talked for 42 minutes. No fluff, no condolences, no curiosity about prison, just real questions, real structure, real needs. At the end, the CEO leaned back and said, You don't sound like someone rebuilding. You sound like someone who's already solid. Serena replied, That's because prison stripped away everything that wasn't. They offered her a 3-month contract, off the record, flat rate, remote. She took it, not for the money, not for the prestige, but because it was proof she could walk back into the room without needing to announce herself. Word spread slowly. Whispers. The quiet one from Roke is consulting again. She didn't disappear. She's not pressing charges. One former Roke Systems employee reached out anonymously. I saw what Kaylin did. I wanted to speak up. I didn't know how. Serena didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because forgiveness wasn't hers to offer anymore. That belonged to the version of her who still believed silence would be protected. She no longer did. At the end of her first contract, she received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Inside, you're doing it. Without screaming, without breaking. That's the kind of noise no one forgets. There was no name. She placed the note in her binder, the one labeled Post-Roke. Serena didn't plan revenge. She planned resilience. She didn't want Kellen to fall. She wanted him to see her rise, without him being the reason. Because the only thing louder than vindication is peace that doesn't need to explain itself. If you believe peace is the strongest response to betrayal, comment, I choose silence that builds. Share this story with someone who walked out stronger, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful moments that speak without shouting. The invitation was printed on thick matte paper with gold embossed text. No logo, no attention-grabbing color. Just 3 lines. Los Angeles Innovation Gala Private Mentor Circle by nomination only. Serena almost declined, not because she felt unqualified, but because the last time she walked into a room full of tech elites, she walked out in handcuffs. But this wasn't about them. This was about the woman she mentored from inside a prison library. The one who'd named her startup after the room number she served time in. The one who listed Serena as chief mentor in her deck. So Serena went, not to be seen, but to stand with. The venue was clean elegance, a downtown rooftop tucked behind high glass walls and soft music. No paparazzi, just soft glances and hard egos. She wore navy again. No jewelry, hair low and neat. Black heels, polished, practical. Her mentee, Tyra, lit up when she saw her. You came. Serena smiled gently. You earned this. Tyra pulled her toward the corner where other startup founders stood in small clusters, some nervous, others pretending not to be. Serena wasn't nervous. Not anymore. She'd walked through worse. This was just another room with people who once thought she disappeared. Let them wonder how. An hour in, Tyra's pitch wrapped. polite applause. No questions. The kind of silent respect money can't buy. Only clean execution earns it. Serena stood quietly to the side, watching, listening, present, until a ripple passed through the air. Heads turned, chatter shifted. A name whispered. Kellen Roke. He walked in like someone trying to look composed, but the sharpness of his stride was gone. He wore the same brand of suit she remembered, but now it didn't sit with the same authority. It hung. He didn't notice her right away, which meant this wasn't about her, which meant fate had better timing than ego ever could. When his eyes found her, it was instinctual. A scan of the room, a pause, a blink, then stillness. She didn't move, didn't break eye contact, and when he walked over, people gave space. They always had. But now it felt different. They gave space not out of respect, but tension. The tension of a story some had only heard whispers about, now standing face to face. Kellen's voice was quieter than she remembered. "You look whole." She tilted her head slightly. "You look like you've been trying to—" He smiled faintly. "I've had time to think. I'm sure you have." A long pause. He searched her expression like he was trying to locate a version of her he once knew. But she didn't hand it to him. Not anymore. "I didn't come to make things right," he said. "I know I can't." "Good." His eyebrows lifted. "Good?" Serena nodded. "Because if you had, you'd be here for you. Not for me." He swallowed hard. "I miss who we were." She didn't flinch. "No," she said. "You miss who I was." A beat passed. The silence between them wasn't bitter. It was full, not of anger, but of truth. Kellen didn't respond. He stepped back, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered. As he turned, Serena spoke once more. "Do better." Quietly, he paused, just long enough to let it land, then walked away. No drama, no spotlight. Just the weight of a man who'd watched someone rise without him. Tyra approached slowly, holding 2 glasses of ginger soda. "You okay?" Serena took one. "Better than he is." Tyra hesitated. "That was him, wasn't it?" Serena nodded. "I thought he'd be taller," Tyra said. Serena laughed, soft, sharp. "He used to be—" Word had already spread through the room, not loudly, not scandalously. But people noticed, and in tech circles, noticing turns into questions. A founder from an up-and-coming AI firm walked over. "Just wanted to say, your presence tonight says more than a press release ever could." Serena didn't answer. He handed her a card anyway. "We're rebuilding, and we need someone who doesn't talk to impress, but to correct." She accepted the card, slid it into her clutch without looking. Later, Tyra found her standing near the balcony, watching the skyline. "I know you don't like these rooms," she said. Serena replied, "I like what we can take from them." Quietly, Tyra looked out over the lights. "You know people are going to ask you to speak now. Publicly. Write, post, teach." Serena said nothing. "Will you?" Tyra asked. "I'm not a brand," Serena said. "I'm a warning." The next morning, a short article appeared on a niche tech ethics blog. Serena Vell seen at LA Innovation Gala. Quiet return, loud respect. Under it, a quote from someone anonymous. She didn't arrive to prove anything, but people noticed she didn't need to. 3 days later, a formal email came in. Subject: invitation to join industry ethics panel body. We're building an advisory team to shape best practices in founder transitions, public accountability, and internal systems of protection. Your experience, and the way you've carried it, makes you an ideal voice. They offered a paid role, flexible, private, impactful. She didn't hesitate. She replied with one line, "I accept. But I speak on my terms." And they agreed. Kellen never reached out again. But Serena didn't need his closure, because standing at that gala, with no PR team, no security, no title, she realized something powerful. She had survived both betrayal and invisibility. And now, without vengeance, she was visible again, on her own terms. She met him at a quiet financial literacy workshop held in a downtown community space. No tech founders, no ex-colleagues, just single mothers, job seekers, and formerly incarcerated women looking to start over. Serena had been asked to speak briefly on managing post-release credit restoration. She wore a grey blazer and flat shoes. No badge, no formal intro, just her name on a folding chair sign. When she finished, the room clapped softly, and as she stepped off the riser, a man at the back nodded, not at her title, not at her story, just at her. He introduced himself with no fanfare. Rice, that was it. No long-winded bio, no assumption she'd heard of him, no loaded questions. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled. He'd taken notes during her talk, real ones, not just keywords to impress, full thoughts. You gave structure, not sympathy, he said. People remember that. Serena looked at him carefully. Are you part of an organization? Nope, just volunteered to help a friend with the event setup. Thought I'd stay and listen. She nodded. That was different. And, in a world where everyone had an angle, different stood out. They crossed paths again a week later at the same space. She was meeting Tyra. He was helping break down tables. Didn't know you were speaking again, he said. I'm not. Then, I'm lucky. She raised an eyebrow. You always say things like that. Only when I mean them. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long conversations about things that didn't require defense. He never asked about Kellen, never asked for details on prison. He only asked things like, what makes you feel rested? What would you do if no one expected anything from you? She'd never been asked those things before. Rice worked as a small business strategist, nothing flashy. He helped community vendors manage operations, family-owned bakeries, landscaping companies, local courier services. He liked systems. He respected quiet, and he listened more than he spoke. That was the part that disarmed her. He didn't flinch when she paused, didn't fill the silence with apologies. He let it breathe, and in that stillness, she felt something begin, not infatuation, not escape. Safety. One evening, they sat across from each other in a small Ethiopian restaurant tucked in the corner of a strip mall. She was laughing at a story about his cousin's failed attempt to build a vending machine empire. Mid-laugh, she stopped. Reese tilted his head. You okay? She looked at him slowly. You haven't Googled me, have you? He didn't blink. No, I've been looking at you. They didn't fall into romance. They arrived at it, slowly, through grocery runs, shared calendars, morning texts that said drive safe instead of I miss you. It wasn't performance. It was consistency. The first time he came over, he didn't bring wine or flowers. He brought spare light bulbs. I figured you haven't changed that hallway one yet. She hadn't. They never defined anything. And that was what made it real. One Sunday, while organizing invoices for a client call, Serena paused and realized his toothbrush was by her sink. Not because they planned it, but because he'd stayed over after falling asleep on her couch. And when she asked if he wanted to take it home, he said, I'm not trying to leave unless you need me to. Eventually, she told him. Everything. No holding back. No sugarcoating. Just the story, the startup, the betrayal, the sentence, the silence. She spoke slowly, without emotion. And when she finished, she waited. Reese leaned back in his chair, nodded once and said, Okay, what do you want for dinner? Serena blinked. That's it. He shrugged. You've already lived it. I don't need to relive it to prove I care. She didn't cry. She didn't thank him. She just stood, walked around the table and kissed him on the forehead. Not passion, not performance, peace. Race never tried to fill the spaces that had been broken. He never offered to fix the past. He just offered to walk with her toward the next thing. And for the first time in years, Serena didn't feel like she had to earn rest. She could just have it. Kellen Roque didn't fall all at once. He unraveled, quietly, like a thread pulled from the bottom of a jacket. You don't notice it right away, until everything starts to loosen at the seams. After Kalin vanished, he tried to hold the company together with press statements and pivot meetings. He blamed external sabotage. He called it a lapse in cross-departmental oversight. But the market didn't flinch. Investors didn't blink. They'd seen enough charm to know what it looked like when the truth stopped matching the slide decks. Within 3 months, 3 major contracts dissolved. The software rollout failed. A class action lawsuit was filed by a group of former employees. One of them quietly mentioned Serena in their affidavit. Her removal marked the start of our dysfunction. It wasn't publicized, but Kellen read it, and he knew. His board thinned. His PR team walked. His CFO resigned in silence, leaving a sticky note that said, "The numbers don't lie. We just didn't listen when they screamed." Kellen stopped showing up to conferences, stopped doing interviews, started wearing sunglasses inside buildings. By year's end, Rogue Systems had sold half its assets to cover legal costs. The remainder was absorbed by a quiet acquisition firm known for salvaging brands and stripping them for parts. Kellen didn't fight it, because fighting would mean owning what he let happen, and he wasn't built for accountability. He moved out of the city, into a modest property along the coast, rented, not owned, no view, no meetings, no noise, just waves and silence. 2 things that don't need anyone's permission to keep moving. He stopped checking the news, until one morning a headline slipped through. Vail Systems named top rising ethical advisory for startups under it, a picture of 4 women in business attire, smiling. Serena wasn't in the front. She was at the side, still quiet, still powerful. Kellen stared at the image for a long time, and for the first time in months, he whispered her name. But not like a question, not like an apology, more like someone remembering where they lost their compass. The envelope arrived unmarked. No logo, no return address, just Serena's name, handwritten with careful strokes. She opened it slowly, expecting paperwork, maybe something related to one of the old settlements still working their way through the system. Instead, inside was a folded note. 1 sentence, "I miss who we were." No signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. She read it once, then again, and then she placed it in a drawer. Not out of emotion, not out of nostalgia, but out of finality, because she knew he didn't miss them. He missed the version of himself she once believed in. That night, she sat across from Reese on their couch. He was flipping through client receipts. She was reviewing a panel schedule. Without looking up, she said. He tried to reach out. Rice didn't ask who, didn't guess. He waited. "I didn't respond," she said. Still calm, still steady. Reese nodded. "You didn't need to." Across the country, Kellen waited days for a reply. Then weeks. Then nothing. No call. No letter. No headline. The silence hit harder than anything she could have written. Because it said, "You are no longer part of the narrative." And for someone like him, who lived through validation, erasure was louder than blame. Serena kept going. Her firm expanded into 3 more cities. She trained former inmates to lead sessions on negotiation, equity agreements, and investor defense. She gave a closed-door talk at a university's business ethics class. One student asked, "Do you believe people change?" Serena smiled gently. "Yes, but some of us don't need to. We were right. We were just outnumbered." Kellen never sent another letter, and she never checked for one. Not because she hated him, because she had healed beyond needing him to know. The auditorium was small, intimate, no camera crew, no live stream, just rows of students, a single spotlight, and a podium with her name typed on a paper card, S. Vel, Ethics in Leadership. Serena stood behind the podium, hands resting lightly on the edge. She didn't bring slides, no deck, no quotes from best-selling authors, just her voice. "I used to believe ethics was about rules," she said. "Now I know it's about moments." She let that hang. Moments when silence is easier than truth. Moments when power disguises itself as protection. Moments when you're asked to explain your survival just to be allowed in the room again. The crowd sat still, phones down, heads up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move her hands much. She didn't need to. I was erased before I was even questioned, and when I didn't defend myself loud enough, they called it guilt. She met their eyes, one by one. But the thing is, silence isn't guilt. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's grief. And sometimes it's the only form of self-respect you have left. She stepped away from the podium without closing remarks, walked slowly to a chair set beside the faculty, and sat. The moderator looked startled but recovered quickly. "Miss Vell is open to a few questions," she said. The hands raised slowly. The third one was a young woman in a denim jacket. Her voice was quiet, but firm. "Do you believe in love after betrayal?" The room shifted. Heads turned. All eyes back on Serena. She smiled. Not politely, not defensively, just real. Then stood and stepped back up to the mic. "Yes," she said, "but only the kind that doesn't ask me to explain my survival." It was after 9 p.m. when Serena left the university. The air was cooler than she remembered. Chicago had that way of reminding you. Seasons turned whether you were ready or not. She walked. No car service, no umbrella. Her coat was light, her heels soft on the pavement. Behind her, the building faded into a quiet silhouette. She didn't look back. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number saved only with a first name, Laney. Tech mentorship cohort. "Your story made me rethink everything. Can I ask something personal?" Serena stopped on the sidewalk and typed back. "Go ahead." A moment passed. Then, "How do you know when you've forgiven someone?" Serena read it twice. She leaned on a parking meter, thumb hovering. Then she typed, "When their name doesn't change your breathing." She reached the bridge that overlooked the city's financial district. She hadn't stood there since she wore a badge with the Roke Systems logo. That badge had been revoked without warning. The same day, a woman in crimson lipstick and smug press quotes was hired to replace her. But tonight, none of that lived here. Tonight, the skyline looked like hers too. Footsteps approached behind her, not fast, not slow. The cadence she'd memorized once. She didn't turn. Kellen spoke first. "Why'd you do it?" His voice wasn't bitter. It wasn't begging either. Just tired. She still didn't turn. Let the lights ahead keep her gaze. "Why'd I do what?" she asked. "You didn't fight me, didn't sue, didn't sell your shares in a tantrum, didn't even show up at the board meeting that renamed the company without your name on it." She turned halfway then. Face calm. Voice calm. "I didn't need the company," she said. "I needed the peace." Kellen nodded, slowly. "That girl, Kaylin, she's gone." Serena didn't flinch. She let the wind answer that part. She sold her shares last quarter, walked away with headlines and nothing else. Couldn't keep a single executive in place. Still, Serena said nothing. "Investors want you back." Quietly, of course. She smiled. "Finally, Kellen." She stepped closer, just enough to let him hear. "You buried me, but I was the soil, not the seed." She passed him. No anger, no pause. Just walked. An hour later, she reached her apartment. Warm light inside, books on the floor, tea cooling on the counter. She set down her coat, turned off her phone, walked to the window. The city pulsed below, busy, tired, alive. And from the quiet, she said it. No one to hear, no one to argue. He'll never know the version of me that didn't need him back. And she smiled. She didn't scream. She didn't post. She didn't beg for anyone to hear her side. She walked out of the fire they threw her into and built something they couldn't touch. If you felt that, leave a comment with just one word: resilient. Let the world know you believe quiet strength speaks louder than revenge. Maybe you've been blamed for what you didn't do. Maybe someone chose a loud lie over your quiet truth. But here's the truth they never say aloud. The one who walks away calm already won. If this story hits you somewhere deep, like, comment, and most of all, subscribe. We tell stories for people who rebuild in silence. and walk out stronger. Tell us where you're watching from. Your story matters too. And don't forget, we've got more coming. More quiet justice, more emotional power, more strength that doesn't need a spotlight. Because around here, we don't scream to be seen. We rise to be remembered.